Howdy folks. Today we're going to be talking about jQuery. jQuery is a third-party library that is honestly one of the oldest and most venerable libraries we use or used to use more commonly as front-end developers. It's definitely fallen out of style, but it was kind of on top for quite a long time, decades. And so you're definitely going to be running into code that uses jQuery at some point. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing we need is to actually get jQuery. Like most third-party libraries, it doesn't come bundled standard into the browser, so I'm not going to be able to just have a basic web page, basic script, and start off loading it. So what I'm going to do, first of all, Google search for jQuery. The first result is jQuery's main site. Now, what you want is you want the CDN. There are some projects that do download jQuery, and if you download it, you actually get the jQuery script locally and you put it into your project. And then you hook that up just like you would hook up a normal code. There's upsides and downsides to that. The upside is that you always know you've got a copy. So if the CDN goes down, which is kind of rare, but it does happen, then you still have a copy and your website still functions. The downside is that it's extra code that has to be downloaded from your server. And one of the things they mention on the site, go to the download link here, a bunch of different ways you can download. You can also get it from NPM or Yarn, or pretty much everywhere else. One of the things they mention here, it offers an advantage if the visitor to your website has already downloaded a copy. So if someone else is using a jQuery from the same CDN and it's exactly the same URL, your browser is going to say, hey, I've already seen this. I'm just going to use whatever I've already got here and not have to download it again. But basically, the main CDN is the stack path one, releases.jquery.com, which is also where this goes, this link here. So there's a couple versions of jQuery. jQuery Core is the big one. UI and mobile and color and all these are just, they're add-ons that you can have. They're not necessary for the main jQuery experience. You can see 3 different versions. You probably want the latest version. And then you can see under here 4 options: uncompressed, minified, slim, and slim minified. What's that mean? Uncompressed is the main library. It's the full data, everything, but it's also with all the white space, all the new lines, all the tabs, all the function names. Minified has gone through a specific process that makes the code shorter. So for example, if there's an internal variable, it may get replaced with the 1 or 2 character name. The browser doesn't care. Those variable names and function names are usually just for us. Now, this doesn't change the library, so really if you're looking for a production website, you probably want the minified because it's less code to download and process. Then there's slim and slim minified. Slim is the jQuery library but missing a lot of the extra fluff. So if really you just need the very simple jQuery experience, slim is what you might want to go for because it's a lot smaller. However, if you pick slim and you find out later on, hey, this feature doesn't work, you might need to go for the full version. Slim minified, again, same as the regular minified. I'm going to grab this. So I can see in the bottom left corner, that just links directly to the JavaScript file. So I'm actually going to right click and copy the link address, because if I click that, it's going to try to download it. Then I'm going to add it in. Script source, just like that. You may run into some jQuery setups that actually look like this. What that does is that's actually saying, this is more popular back when websites were HTTP or HTTPS. And the main issue you'd run in is if you're running an HTTP site, it wouldn't be able to load HTTPS resources. Or it might have been the other way around. It might have been the HTTPS site wouldn't load the HTTP resources. So if you see something like this, it basically means your code wants the browser to decide based on its existing protocol. Problem is, if you're loading this just like open default browser, your protocol is going to be the file protocol, so it's not going to work too well, and HTTPS is perfectly fine. But you may see some sites occasionally that just are missing that protocol, and that's kind of what that means. It's very old though, we don't do that anymore really. Okay, now I'm going to load in my own script. Now, let's say I open this up. Take a look at my inspect. Look at my network tab, and I'll load it again just to see. Okay, I can see that jQuery shows up in there. Gives me a 200, and you can see that's the minified. It looks real funny with these parameters like that. Doesn't do anything yet, though, because jQuery by default doesn't do anything. It's a library. You have to write code with it. So let's take a look at the first piece, which is the jQuery function. jQuery function is that $. So jQuery popularized using the $. There are a couple other libraries that will do this, but they're very rare. If you run into code and you're looking through the JavaScript code and you see something that's a $, called as a function, it's almost 99% going to be jQuery. So you can probably safely assume that. For example, if you're going through WordPress and you look through some JavaScript code, jQuery. Bunch of other sites. It's very popular, used all the time. So what does this function do? First of all, you might be saying, I didn't know I could use the $, as a function. Yeah, it's a perfectly valid function name. It's also very short. That's why they chose it. This function is multi-purpose. It can do one of two things. Let's look at the first one. So let's say I have div class equals blah, and then maybe div equals my div, and a section. Okay, I want to do some stuff to all of these. So if you want to select this, you could do a couple things. You could select it by its tag, you could select it by its class, you could select this one by its ID or its tag, you could select this one by tag. And a lot of ways you do that, you could use getElement by ID, getElements by class name, query selector all. The jQuery function behaves a little bit like query selector. In fact, it's where query selector came from. So we're going to start off. I can put in, I think I called that, but yeah. That's a query selector. What is that going to return? So if I said my div equals that, let's see. And you can see what this returns. It doesn't return a DOM element. It returns what's known as a jQuery array. And you can see it's got that element in it. A jQuery array is really useful. jQuery will always return an array from every of its operations, even if there's one element, even if there's 0 elements. And that helps you kind of deal with a lot of issues that the DOM would run into. For example, if I now decided to change the style or the text on this, I don't actually need to worry about checking to see if it exists. If it was a DOM element, I'd have to check, is this a real element? Does it exist? Because otherwise I'm going to get a undefined error. So let's grab a couple others. So we'll get one by the ID. You know what? I'm just going to put that side by side so I don't have to keep looking at it. Okay, and then finally, we'll get one by the section. Okay, now let's try to set some text on them. Okay, normally you do text content. Well, jQuery is just text as a function. Okay, and then our section. Pretty simple. It's meant to be lightweight, right? You can see there's not a lot of code here. But if you run across this $, you know immediately this is fetching any elements that match this. And there you go. Make that a little bit bigger. So now what if I had 2 sections? So maybe I put another section in here. Maybe I put a third one. If you were working with the DOM, you'd have to actually change this from query selector to query selector all, and then loop over every element with a loop. I don't have to change anything for jQuery. It automatically, because it's that array, it pulls all 3 of them and just updates them. So let's take a look at the other possibility for this function. It's a versatile function. It can just create HTML. out of thin air. Document.createElement, right here. So now, if I console log my span, you can see it's a jQuery array, but it contains a span. Now maybe I want to attach that to the body. So let's take our body and then append my span. Run that, take a look at my elements, and you can see there's our span. Notice it's after the script tags because it got appended. Okay, and normally in this case, you'd have created the element, then you'd set the text, you'd set all that stuff. Don't need to do that. I can just do that in this call. I can just put any HTML in here. It's going to create it. I can add even a color attribute, maybe. Notice I'm using single quotes because I have double quotes here. Now it's that. This is much more powerful than create element because I can style all this stuff myself. So those are the two main things that you can do with this $sign here. There's a couple others. So you could see we can append. This is similar to append child. One other is if I want to change an attribute, let's say. I can take my div.attr, the name of it, the value. Now if I take a look at my span here, there's that attribute. If I want to get it back out, kind of like that. And you can see it's the same function. So if I run that now, you can see there's my value. Getting and setting data in jQuery oftentimes uses the same function, and the way it knows is if I pass that second parameter in, I want to set it. Similar with text. If I want to get the text, I just call it, and it'll return it. Same thing with CSS. Say I want to set some CSS. Property, background color, red. Red might not be a great color for background color. There you go. Same if you want to get it. You just call it. You don't have to pass a parameter. Now, if you call it and you do pass this parameter here, it'll also still return. But it's versatile in the fact that you don't have to remember as many functions. You don't have to remember a bunch of style dot or data attribute dot or any of that stuff. It's just very simple. Attribute, CSS, text. So that is the basics of jQuery. You've got your library, which you probably want to get from a CDN. You've got your $function, which can both act as query selector, but also it can create out elements, nested elements even, with any HTML you need. You have the text function, which will set the content, the text content, and also retrieve it. The append, which acts like append child, attribute, attr, which sets or gets attributes, and CSS, which sets or gets style properties. jQuery is a very versatile library, and it was very popular for a long time because it made things a lot easier than the native browser DOM attributes and functions. It has since fallen out of style because browsers have just gotten better. The JavaScript standards gotten better, and also things like React have come along, which kind of make this obsolete. But it's still very possible you're going to run into this code, or maybe you even want to use it yourself on some of your simpler projects. Hope this is useful, and I'll see you all next time.